Well, there's been a lot of news today, and I guess here's some thoughts on it. The first big item is the president elect has said that he's not going to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton, despite repeatedly promising to do so while he was running for president. Who would have predicted that? Except nearly anybody who was objective about it. This is a big broken promise, but I can't say that I didn't see it coming. The argument that the president-elect made was that it was just not something to put the country through. And first of all, I think the idea of lock her up and using the idea of prosecution to campaign on is wrong. He shouldn't have done it in the first place. But the idea that we have to let politicians get away with unethical conduct because we just can't handle it as a people if we have our politicians, our most senior politicians prosecuted is incredibly harmful to our country. It may have began back in 1974 with Gerald Ford's decision to pardon former President Nixon. And I understand that President Ford really did have the best of intentions. Country had been through Watergate for 2 years. But ever since then, we've had these incidents where we've let politicians get away with things and refuse to act because it would be just too traumatic for the American people. Senator Robert Byrd, who was at that time considered the conscience of the Senate, declared that yes, by committing perjury in a civil trial and by obstructing justice, Bill Clinton had committed high crimes and misdemeanors, which under the Constitution are grounds for removal. But Senator Byrd chose not to remove him. Because the country needed Bill Clinton so much. He was so indispensable that even though he had committed acts that should have led to his removal, we can't handle it. And now we find out that we can't handle Hillary Clinton being prosecuted for things which lesser degrees have led to other people being removed and actually going to jail. Now, you don't do lock her up, but there is no reason why a less politicized department that wasn't in the back pocket of Mrs. Clinton's party couldn't have at least taken a look at the FBI results and acted accordingly. And so I think this really doesn't do a whole lot. And it goes to the president-elect's personal ethics as well. There was a report put out by the Trump Foundation acknowledging essentially self-dealing, that funds from the foundation were either funneled to Mr. Trump or to other people who should not have received the funds, that it was prohibited for the foundation to send money to. And at the same time, the president-elect has basically ignores calls for him to divest himself of resources because he has a worldwide empire of hotels and business, and many of which interacts with foreign governments and with people who could get influence from the U.S. government. And a lot of people are concerned about that sort of arrangement in the White House. Well, the president-elect said that he cannot have a conflict of interest. Well, in terms of the law on conflict of interest, he's actually technically correct because the president is exempted from the law because the president faces decisions of great magnitude. You don't want a situation where a president can be prosecuted on a conflict of interest in how he intervenes in a hurricane or something like that, because well you had this property, it was kind of in that area, and that's why you allocated those resources. However, every prior president has tried to divest themselves of those basic appearances of conflict of interest. And the president-elect does have his children managing his business interest. However, he is also having his children help him run the government. And this is a situation where there is a very strong possibility of the presidency being used in ways that actually benefit Mr. Trump's financially and personally, and not so much the American people. And there's not a whole lot legally that can be done about it beyond the impeachment powers. Of course, though, Congress would never do that, because America couldn't handle the trauma of an impeachment. And so, in summary, Mr. Trump has a great ethics reform package, but it's going to be pushed on Congress in a kind of do as I say, not as I do way. And in summary, the old boss is not too much different from the new boss. And that's where things stand right now.